Meeting to order, call the roll.
Howard Ron.
Here.
Deborah Carlson is absent. David Friedman is absent. Ed Goodale.
Here.
Gail Listener.
Here.
John Satter.
Here.
And Steve Ross. Here. We have a quorum.
The first item, we'll talk about that in a second. The first item, though, is the approval of the, it says August 3 minutes. I'm not sure, is that it? Yeah. Is the approval of the minutes for September, so September 21. So is there a motion with respect to those minutes?
Move we approve as submitted.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. The second item on the agenda, by the way, we're doing zoning board first, that's a board, and then the same cast of characters is the fence board, and we'll do that second. The next item is public comment. Is there anyone here who doesn't have a item before the board? Because if you're one of those, now's your time to say something. Okay, no public comments. The third item is a public hearing to consider a request of Burton Gutterman, 1010 Eastwood, to reduce the required north side yard for a one-story addition. So whoever wants to speak on this should raise their hand to be sworn in, even if you're not going to be speaking first. And then, John, I'll swear you in.
You swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth in the matter about to be heard?
I do.
Thank you.
Okay, come on up. Tell us who you are and why we should approve this. While you're getting set up, I do want to say that 2 of the 7 of us are not here. In order for a variance to be approved, it requires 4 votes. So there's a pretty slim margin. What we have traditionally done in this circumstance is you make your presentation, see how it's going, and if you think it's dicey, particularly if you have a majority but it's not enough, what we've traditionally done is said, okay, pass it. Don't. If there's a vote, you can't come back for I think 6 months, but we allow people to pass to go the next month. I don't know that you're going to have a problem, but I just want to make sure you keep that in mind. So with that, tell us who you are and why we should approve.
Great. Can I pass out? just some
Absolutely.
additional-
Absolutely.
Thank you.
If it pleases the board, my name is Matthew Kerouac. I'm the architect working with Bert and Pam Gutterman on the addition to their newly purchased single-family home at 1010 Eastwood. They are residents of Glencoe for the last 38 years. They just moved from a house on Bluff that they lived in for 29 years. Kind of downsizing a little bit. I'm very excited to move into this new house. In doing so, they asked me to look at renovating the house. The project consists of a one-story addition to the front and rear of the residence. The front addition is a porch and entry. The rear one-story addition will accommodate a new kitchen, mudroom, a little office area, and an expansion of the garage for storage. Both Bert and Pam are avid cyclists, and the extension to the garage storage is required to accommodate their ensemble of bicycles that they keep and cherish. The existing home is a beautiful 1952 Hempel-built home, and we're trying to maintain the integrity of the residence, keeping the project as small as possible. In doing so, with the trying to create additional storage within the garage, we felt the best was to move the project to the rear of the residence. The existing residence is pre-existing non-conforming. It sits 6 feet from the north lot line, so it encroaches 4 feet into the required 10 foot. What we're asking for is a 20% reduction in the side yard lot line from 10 feet to 8 feet, and that's for a length of 14 feet 1 inches. to accommodate a portion of this rear addition. Within the design, we wanted to maintain the integrity of the residence. We wanted to minimize any intrusion for the neighbor to the north. We're way below what the setback plane would require. We are taking away a dilapidated screen porch that kind of sits in the same vicinity as our addition. And trying to be a good neighbor by cleaning up the area. You can see from the photographs, it's hard to take photos because it's so overgrown. So they've moved to kind of eliminate some of that overgrown for the neighbors and for themselves to kind of allow the house to breathe a little bit. So hopefully with what we're doing, dealing with a non-conforming existing structure and minimizing our footprint for the addition, we hope that this variance will be passed.
You could have added more FAR to the site.
Yes,
Excess
yeah.
FAR, I mean,
Yeah.
it's a big parcel and
It is.
the house doesn't.
Right.
take up the-
We're trying not to create something beyond
So you
what
could
they
have come here
truly
with a request for, a massive
100%, right.
change.
Our goal is to honor the existing house, but to give the house that was built 50, 62 years ago, update it to what, no mudroom, a kitchen that's inadequate, give it a life that it deserves today, but still maintain the integrity of the house and the neighborhood.
John, I think I know the answer to this. Have we gotten any objections from any of the neighbors? They were notified and no objections.
No, we have not. We actually had a person call in favor, Robert Robel, I believe, at 1002 Eastwood. He said he would have been happy to write a letter, and I said, just contact is good.
That works.
And I was just handed in Perry Mason style letter from the neighbors at 1018 for approval from the Malamuds. They are just to the, are they the neighbor to the north?
Yeah.
John, if I could give this to you.
Anything else, or do you want questions now?
I could walk through the design or the, but I think it's straightforward. I'll let you ask questions. If I need to refer to something, I'd be more than happy to.
Any questions on this? We're not that tough. Okay, well, I don't have any questions on this one either.
It's a very
Yes,
modest
yeah. So,
request.
is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second?
Let's have a roll call.
Goodale,
Yes.
Listener,
Yes.
Tanner,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
and Raw.
Aye. Thank you for your excellent presentation. Good luck with your project. Glad you're staying in Glencoe.
Thank you. I appreciate your time. I sit on the board, so I appreciate your time that you put into this.
I think that concludes the zoning board part of the meeting. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that concludes the zoning board part of the meeting. So we're gonna get to the slightly more interesting fence. Let's call the fence meeting to order and have a roll call.
Howard Brown,
Here.
Ed Goodale.
Here.
Gail Listener,
Here.
John Tanner,
Here.
Steve Ross. Here. And Carlson and Freeman are absent.
Anybody who wants to, the first item and the only item, I don't see anybody else, but the only item is the request of Alex and Jennifer Lidowitz, 610 Longwood, for a variation to increase the allowed column fence height from 4 feet to 7 feet 9 3/8 inches for 2 front entry columns with sidewalls sloped to meet the existing 4-foot high stone fence. Anyone who wants to speak on this, raise your hand so John can swear you in, please.
You swear to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth of the matter about to be heard. Thank you.
Come on up, tell us who you are, and why you think we should approve this, and same rules apply if it looks like it's dicey or maybe going south and you want to, before we vote, and you want a chance to postpone, we usually give that. And you know, it's not like, and we'll try not to trick you, you know, it's not like you talk one way and then you say okay and then we'll say okay, so just, you know,
Thank you very much.
okay.
Hello, my name is Michael Graham. I'm an architect with Liederbach and Graham Architects in the city. And we designed the home for Alec and Jennifer perhaps 14 years ago. We've been privileged to design 2 thorough renovations here in Glencoe and then 2 new residences, replacement residences here in Glencoe. And we take the responsibility to design something that's appropriate incredibly seriously. That design has gone on. We've continued to sort of like tinker with this and that at the house, making sure that bits and pieces are brought up to speed. We just recently did a piece of metalwork right by the front door where they spent 76 hours designing a piece of bronze work right next to the front door. It's just the left front door. So we're just constantly trying to sort of adjust things and make things better. And what's I think really quite nice about the house is that at 610 Longwood is that it's aged into the neighborhood, and I think that at this point, when you drive by, you think it might have been there in the 1920s. So to that end, one of the paradigms or the antecedents for the house was a house in Britain that we visited with the client, and it's a house that's named Little Thacum. And Little Thacum has these 2 beautiful entrance pillars that the client that our owners always love on either side of the front door. And I'll show you. This is actually this is pretty much like Saturday. This is the day that we were there at Little Thacum. You can see that's the house, and you can see the piers on either side. This is perhaps on a little bit nicer day. You can see the sort of 8 piers on either side. A little bit nicer. So basically the objective is to basically identify the front door by constructing piers there on either side that define the pathway up to the front door. And I can just pass around these drawings. So these are to scale. It shows what we're proposing to do in front. You can see actually if you look at the one photograph where there's the gentleman walking up the path, you can see there's the scale figure there. You can see the fence piers in context. So that's basically our objective is to replicate that historical paradigm. So John identified 10 neighbors that would be affected if packets went out to, and I've gone around and met with 9 of those neighbors at their homes, and no one has an objection to this proposal. The 10th neighbor, the Gateleys, haven't been around, so I haven't been able to meet with them, but we haven't had any sort of objection from any of the neighbors. Sat with them. Everybody's very supportive of this enterprise, and that's where we stand right now. Is basically we're just coming to see what your thoughts are in terms of this, and the other component is back a number of years ago. I believe that John's staff looked at this and identified a number of other examples in the neighborhood of piers like this that are basically consistent with the height and scale that we're proposing this to be. The closest one that I'm aware of is basically just at the northwest corner of Longwood and Hazel. There's a house there that has 7.5-foot piers, brick piers there that run around the entire property with an iron fence between. The gentleman there has a really beautiful collection of antique fruit trees. I don't know if you know this gentleman, but he's just got a great sort of set of fruit trees that are in his yard. But these piers exist all the way around that property. But they're perhaps, in this neighborhood, this sort of estate, sort of neighborhood, there's probably another dozen examples of piers of this scale that are within 2 blocks here of this proposal. So that's, I guess, my proposal, my presentation this evening, and I'd love to have your thoughts.
So, these things sort of ebb and flow, and I think the current zoning board is as flexible as we can be with zoning variances for which there are specific limits that we can work with. And we have people that come in and they have, some kind of hardship. They want to be able to use their property. And we've been approving most of those. The fence situation is different. There's no provision in the ordinance for, say, a 20% variance. It's just, this is not allowed unless you can talk the zoning board, the fence board, into allowing it. The reason for the fence limits, as I understand it, is so that unlike some other villages, the village of Glencoe looks open. I think our village plan talks about the village looking open, and I think if you went to some other villages that are, otherwise kind of comparable to us, they have some large, magnificent houses behind large, high, magnificent fences, and Glencoe sort of insists that's not what we want. There are examples of some higher fences. Most of those are grandfathered in before we had the zoning ordinance, although there are exception or two where folks have snuck in. When I was on the village board 100 years ago, there was a homeowner who just, he decided that a higher fence would look good and he built it. And then we entered into extensive litigation against the homeowner to try to make him take it down. And after 2 years and a huge amount of money being spent by everybody, we ended up into a ceasefire in which the homeowner paid us a whole bunch of money, and we said, okay. It wasn't the most satisfactory result, but we weren't prepared to spend huge, vast sums of Glencoe's money over a fence, which was, was attractive enough. It was just 5.5 feet tall. That's a long. I am almost always in favor of letting people do what they want with their homes if the neighbors don't mind. With zoning variances, making a house bigger, making it more livable. But I have to say, I have trouble with fences because it's an appearance thing, and it's not that there's anything unattractive about your fence. There isn't, but it's high, it's a fence, and it changes the way the village looks. And I wonder if we're doing our job if we approve these. And I note that you guys were in here once before, and the zoning board turned you down with what I assume is the same fence. You're absolutely allowed to come back. I think you come back every 6 months. I think this zoning board is more flexible than the prior zoning board, but I'm still troubled by fences, because it's, if you were if the Litowitches were public figures and they needed a fence for security or something, but they're not saying that.
I don't think that would comply.
Well, I don't know if it would comply or not, but it would be something that would explain why the usual appearance rules maybe shouldn't apply. But here, I think you've designed, an attractive columns and fences, and I see what it's based on, but I am troubled by fences.
So this is basically just a very narrow portion, right at the very center of the lot to denote the front walk. It's just 2 gate piers on either side, but the remaining fence is completely compliant.
I understand, and that's helpful. and that, if it weren't, I just told you, I would have said, you know, I'm against it. I'm thinking about it because I appreciate that this gate, you know, right at the entryway and columns, that doesn't make it not, it doesn't make the whole place look closed and fenced behind.
Right.
The goal is not to look like Xanadu and Citizen Kane. We don't
Sure,
want to be.
And Chairman, you know, my response back is that in this neighborhood, there are quite a few examples of exactly this. So
Could you go through those, you have a lot of photos here of other houses in the neighborhood. Could you review those and compare and contrast, that sort of thing?
Sure, I think that actually a lot of those photographs were assembled by the Glencoe staff.
Well, you're probably familiar with them because they
Sure.
make your case or don't make your case, maybe you can compare and contrast them and.
Sure, almost all of
I
them
do
are.
want to correct, we never assembled any of the photographs.
Oh, okay.
Nor, as far as I know, handed out any addresses on these. These may have been observed at the time of photographs taken, but I'm not showing that we ever took these photographs.
Well, it's, you know, it's, look, it's obviously helpful to your cause, so,
Go ahead.
tell us about
Sure,
it.
sure. Let me grab that
I mean,
packet.
they're attached here, so maybe you
Yeah.
can.
And, you know, in the interest of full disclosure, either last month or the month before, we just approved a sort of similar fence variance on 42
And I was,
And I was one of the two, so, you know.
but let's take 614 Sheridan, I mean, that's the last of the photos in the back. 614 Sheridan is the last of the photos. And,
Sure, so,
not too far away from the subject property.
Yeah.
I can give a little history on some of these.
Yeah,
I'm very
I think it's
familiar
just
with
a
them over the years. The 614, actually the house to the south, which has a newer brick wall, it replaced the same kind of wall as over here, but this house has an older wall that's probably 75 to 80 years old. It never had a variation at all. The fence to its south did come before the zoning, the fence board, to actually rebuild
600.
the whole thing from scratch. So it was the same height as the existing, but they needed to totally rebuild.
I remember that.
And they,
Isn't the difference though here between the 614, because I think this is my friend's house, that it's continually hot, whereas I think what we're talking about here are two columns where it just eases up for a very short period.
right, this
the
is
whole
actually
fence,
almost a 6-foot fence,
the entire.
and it has some
Like
higher
the Sherwood
columns at
Road.
the driveway, but you're right, it's a continuous.
right, and that's basically the on that side of the street, on the west side of Sheridan Road, basically for most of the frontage between, I think, Hawthorne and Hazel. The north side, or the west side of the street has a fairly high wall that's punctured. I think there's two houses that are served by that fence. They're fairly tall. And then I think all the driveway openings are punctuated by these gate piers. 75 Maple Hill, the gates there actually are, I think those are 14, I think that's a 14-foot tall set of piers on either side. 676 Longwood is the closest one to the house. And this is basically very similar to what we're proposing to do, which is basically that that there's a fairly tall brick pier that identifies the entrance to the property, and then a very low wall on either side. In this case, the wall's about 2 foot tall with a I think that there's 2 foot of brick wall, and then there's 4 feet of iron fence on top of that. So it is
This one dates at least to the 1920s.
Right.
That location.
And that property, this fence actually extends, so that's on the northwest corner. The corner house is enclosed by this. But I think, John, isn't the house that's directly to the north of that, which is a replacement house, doesn't that fence run across the front of that,
Yeah,
of that house as well?
that's a new house, that fence is the same
Right.
fence.
I think it's the same
Yeah.
estate fence.
It was not built new, it was there before.
Right.
So how high are your columns in comparison to the one at 676?
Our columns they're about the same size in terms of scale. These, I think the fence is about 6, and I think that the top, the apex of this is about 8.5 feet. And I think we're proposing something that's about 7'9" or something like that. So it's, consistent. It's consistent with the neighborhood and consistent with other sort of estate type houses that are there. So. The one prior to that, this is at the corner, I can't remember, John, this is at the corner of Sheridan and Glade. And there's a series of these things, they're about 9, I think they're 9 feet tall that run around there. It's a brick, like a Georgian pier with a big limestone top.
And those date back to an estate.
Again, yeah,
The
it is
houses
estate
behind there
property.
are all from the 50s and 60s, but the estate house is way back there, and it dates from the mid-20s. The house that has a really, really tall ones with the urns on the top, that, as I remember, is on Park. That's just, so it's closer to the village center. But that house was just recently renovated. And then there's another one at 69 Park with tall piers on either side.
So these are all much older properties where the fences have been there for a very long time, right?
Well, I think that there's, yeah, I think
So
that,
and this is the historic context of
right, this is the historic context of what,
your new request.
it just basically puts what we're proposing in a context, specifically trying to address the question of whether it's consistent with the Glencoe built, the built environment in Glencoe. I think that there are a good number of examples of this type of thing happening. And as I remember, there was actually like as a fence board of appeal, didn't you approve a gate post fairly recently?
We did, 4-2.
What was
It's the
that?
one on 10, I labeled it 10 Maple Hill. That's
Oh,
the
okay.
one.
Howard, I wasn't here, what was the controversy associated, why was it not unanimous, what was the feeling of the?
Well, it's because, it's a fence.
Was it an opaque fence?
Yes. Well, yeah, it was.
Was that a driveway?
It was,
John, is
It's a driveway.
yeah, there's a picture.
Yes.
I think.
So it has.
Oh, okay.
Of course, this is a 12-foot
Wow.
type thing. This is much taller than what we're proposing, if you count the 2 sculptures on either side.
And it had the higher than 4-foot entry gates between the columns.
Right.
Which
And we're not proposing a gate there. It's just the 2 piers, and it's just a recollection of that house originally. So.
And you're not proposing any change to the vehicular access, it's only
No.
pedestrian access? Where's the site that's labeled 494? It's a construction project. Is that in
Yeah.
town?
That was a new house, well, that's an old photograph from probably 2004 or 2005. That has a wrought iron fence that was there from the old house that was demolished, so there's a new house at that location. But the fence was not replaced.
Okay, do you remember what street that was?
That's on Shared Road.
Oh,
Sorry,
okay.
494 Shared.
Okay.
There's actually 2 new houses next to each other.
Hmm.
This one has the iron gate. There's fence.
So what do you guys think?
John, the ordinance appears that there's some reasons for life findings. The grant a variance. And I guess it's, will allow higher than 4-foot entry columns, but not higher perimeter fences. So here we're, really is the focus more on the columns, and just a short connection, if you will, on an angle that provides a nice contour.
Just a transition from the 4-foot fence to.
Opposed to just doing like a right angle, and
Right.
it's a little bit more, and that's more in keeping with the historical reference of the house you referenced earlier in your presentation. That's
We think that provides a nice visual transition from the 4-foot fence to the entry bridge.
And then the following, item 7, it references a solid wrought iron fence having historical significance. Is that just if you have like an old wrought iron fence that has some historical significance, or are you saying that?
The example of that one was at Dell Place in Sheridan, at the southeast corner, where the owner came and got a variation. I believe the iron fence is about 5 feet tall. And he was salvaging this from a different location in Chicago, and he wanted to put it on his property there. And the board granted a variation under that condition. There might be one or two other ones that I can't remember, but that was the one that comes in my mind, number 7.
So you think it's a stretch to consider historical significance with their design model?
You know, I actually think that there is some flexibility. So columns are not as big a problem as fences. And a column with a transition is a little more of a problem than a column with no transition going directly to the 4 feet. And a fence that's got space, which a wrought iron fence probably does, is probably less of a problem for what the purpose of the ordinance is, which is the open field for the village. I will grant you that these column cases are close cases because they're not fences, they're columns.
So our fence across the front is actually it's about 2 foot 4 inches or something like that. It's not a tall fence at all across the front. It's just basically a boundary marker thing. So it's always been our intention to have the yard be very open to the street, consistent with what I think the reason that the 4-foot zone. But this is just the client desiring something that references the Paradigm House.
Is there a plan to make the fence 4 feet?
No.
Howard, it seems very different than the 10 Maple Hill case, from massing and.
Well, yeah.
I mean, it just.
Yeah, no,
It's different than
yeah.
Because if the applicant had come before us with the 10 Maple Hill scale, and from here, we would maybe be reacting differently. I mean, I wasn't at the meeting, but I can see that with the opaque driveway fencing and those size of those columns, it was a tough.
Yeah, I didn't actually, I wasn't as concerned with the columns because they're just columns. I was concerned with the opaque door. But we're getting that here too, so.
We have that?
No.
There's no door.
There's
No, there's no door. I apologize.
There's no gate proposed.
And it's just a
to be open.
pedestrian
Okay.
access point.
Okay,
It feels different,
okay.
I'm not really particularly troubled by this, although I don't think we can really point to a historic, the historicity of the wall is only, 14 years old?
Correct.
I mean, you really can't point to that as a
Oh,
historic
it
feature.
wasn't pre-existing.
Right. But again, we're talking about the 2 piers and the transition to the wall, so I'm not really troubled by this.
Okay. I think you're probably safe. So, Anyone want to make a motion?
Move we approve the Litowitz variance request.
Second.
Let's have a roll call.
Goodale,
Yes.
Listener,
Yes.
Satter,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
and Wrong.
No. Congratulations on your project.
Thank you.
Better this time than 10 years ago. Good luck with it.
Yeah, I think, Chairman, what the reason that last time we had a hard time was because of construction parking on the street. You know, the neighbors were upset, and this was a way to sort of vent that frustration. I think we've tried to be good neighbors subsequently.
You know, in my view, this was a very close case, and I wish you the best of luck with your project. If I thought you needed my vote, I would have thought more about it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
I
And
think
thank you all for your service, because coming here every month and doing this, I know it's a lot of time out of your lives, and I really appreciate the service that you made. Thanks.
I think we're done. Anybody have anything else before we have a motion to adjourn?
No meeting next month, is that right, Jen?
No meeting next month.
And so I'm not going to be around for the January meeting if we have one. Steve, are you going to be around for the January meeting if we have one?
Hope so.
It would be your turn. So I'm traveling then as a result of not very clever travel plans, and in fact, I'm on a
Is January
plane.
4th?
Yeah. So if we have a meeting, would you be the chairperson? You had your shot last time, so.
Let me know. Anything to do to help you.
There you go. Okay, let's have a roll call, or have we done it yet? Have we said all approved?
Move we adjourn.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?